I don't know what's gone on. I'm really glad Princess Diana's not here to see it because there's too much water under the bridge now.
Arguments with your brother became physical.
It was a build-up of frustration.
And I think that that relationship's gone.
At 63, former royal chef Darren McGrady has finally broken his silence. And what he revealed isn't just heartbreaking. It's a quiet confirmation that there's so much more to everything we believed about Prince William and Prince Harry.
I cooked for them as young boys. I helped Prince Harry as a baby while Princess Diana's eating cereals in the kitchen.
He wasn't just their chef. He was there when Diana cried behind closed doors, when the boys spilled custard on the floor, when laughter echoed through the palace kitchen like any normal home until it didn't. For decades, he held on to one belief, that the bond between William and Harry, built on bedtime snacks and flower fights, could withstand anything. But now, even he admits he was wrong. This isn't just another story about royal tension. It's about love lost in slow motion, about what happens when two brothers grow into two different worlds and stop looking back. And when the one man who saw it all finally says, the rift is real, it's no longer gossip, it's grief. Darren McGrady was never meant to be part of royal history. He started in the palace kitchens like any other ambitious young chef, fresh-faced, humble, and determined to master the perfect roast pheasant. But in 1982, when he stepped into Buckingham Palace for the first time, he had no idea he was walking into a front-row seat to one of the most complex, heartbreaking royal relationships of the modern era. He never received medals or waved from balconies. He didn't brief the press or attend state dinners. He just cooked, quietly, consistently. And for 15 years, he was the man behind the meals that comforted queens, calmed princesses, and brought two young boys more joy than any protocol ever could. He was there through the highs and the heartbreaks. From preparing the Queen's beloved venison at Balmoral to watching Princess Diana's shoulders tense as another scandal broke. Darren was never in the headlines, but he was always in the room. Close enough to sense the storm behind the smiles. Close enough to see the things that never made it into the papers. But everything changed when he was assigned to Kensington Palace to cook not for the monarch, but for a mother. And not just any mother, Diana. That's where he met the boys. William and Harry weren't princes in his kitchen. They were messy, loud, sweet, stubborn kids, licking spoons, knocking over flour jars, and asking if dessert could be served before dinner just this once. Darren didn't just feed them. He watched them grow, and whether he meant to or not, he remembered everything. He baked their birthday cakes. He kept their secrets. And over time, he stopped seeing them as heirs to a throne and started seeing them as brothers, not just by blood, but by bond. But now, at 63, Darren McGrady has broken his silence. And the truth he's carried all these years? It's not about a royal scandal. It's about a heartbreak he never saw coming. Because the boys he once called partners in crime, they're not even speaking anymore. And what Darren saw in those palace kitchens might explain why. You know, there's something sacred about kitchens that isn't talked about enough. While the state kitchens at Buckingham Palace, with their 40-odd staff and military precision, are awesome and revered, it was the smaller, cozier kitchen at Kensington Palace, which raised William and Harry, that really stood out for Darren. This was where he got to know the real princes, not the portraits, not the polished heirs, but the muddy-shoed, sugar-hyper, pajama-clad kids who called him Daz and begged to help stir the custard, even though they always spilled half of it. Prince William, ever the quiet thinker, would tiptoe in and ask if a second serving of treacle tart was possible without their strict nanny noticing. Harry, already halfway into the pantry, never waits for an answer. That was their rhythm. William planned. Harry pounced. They were chaotic and so charming all at once. Some of their favorites were homemade mac and cheese and banana desserts. But there was one dish Darren remembered fondly: Queen of Puddings, a soft, custardy dessert topped with jam and meringue. William and Harry lit up every time it was served. Even Diana, who was famously conscious of healthy eating, would sneak a spoonful when no one was looking. And the Queen herself enjoyed it too. For a fleeting moment, a shared love for a sweet dish made royalty feel human. But Diana wanted more than sweet treats. She wanted normalcy. She let the boys eat in front of the TV on weekends. She rolled her eyes when staff pushed for steamed vegetables and low-fat options. One time, when McGrady offered to make gourmet burgers at the palace, she turned him down and said, "No, let them have McDonald's for the Happy Meal toys. That's the whole point." And that indeed was the whole point. Inside that warm little kitchen, Diana created a world where William and Harry weren't just princes, they were brothers. Where dinner was about laughter, not lineage. Where they could pretend for just a few hours that there wasn't a crown hanging over one of their heads and an impossible question weighing on the other's heart. But even in that joy, Darren noticed something most people missed: the little cracks. Even though they weren't loud at the time, there was no denying their existence. The thing is, William was always measured, even as a child. He was the kind of boy who thought before he spoke, who picked up on tension before anyone said a word. There was a gravity to him, even when he was 6. Harry, on the other hand, was sunshine with sharp corners, impulsive, affectionate, and fiercely sensitive. He lived out loud, felt everything too deeply, and wore his heart like a badge he didn't yet know how to protect. In the early years, it was charming, complimentary even. William grounded Harry. Harry made William laugh, but the world outside the palace gates had already decided who they were meant to be. William was the heir, Harry, the spare. And no matter how hard Diana tried to blur those lines, Darren could see how they were being drawn bit by bit, silently and with unspoken weight. William had a sense of purpose, even back then. He knew where he was going, what he would become. It wasn't arrogance, it was inevitability. But Harry? Harry once asked Darren in the middle of breakfast over a slice of buttered toast, "Will I ever be king too?" It was an innocent question, one any child might ask. But it wasn't the words that stuck with Darren. It was the look that came with it, the uncertainty, the quiet ache of someone trying to figure out where they fit in a world that only made room for one. The pressure on the princess grew with age. William started joining his father on official duties. He had briefings, public appearances, expectations. Meanwhile, Harry sat in the shadows of the same rooms watching it all happen, knowing none of it was for him. Darren remembered hearing him blurt out once, "Why don't they ever ask me stuff?" after overhearing staff discussing William's next event. William shrugged it off, but Darren didn't forget it. Still, they were boys. They fought. They made up. They teased and tackled and forgave faster than adults ever could. And back then, the love between them was real, messy, loud, and unconditional. McGrady believed it could outlast anything. But time doesn't just stretch bonds. It tests them. And when Diana was gone, what was left between them had to stand on its own. When Princess Diana died, the world saw two brothers walking side by side behind her coffin, shoulder to shoulder, face to face with heartbreak. For many, That moment sealed an image that would last for decades. William and Harry, bonded for life by the pain of losing their mother. But Darren McGrady knew better. He knew that what looked like unity wasn't always strength. Sometimes it was survival. In the months that followed Diana's death, the palace became colder, not in temperature, but in spirit. The warmth she brought to that little kitchen, the spontaneous laughter, and the rebellious joy simply vanished. Everything that made Kensington Palace feel like a home had been replaced by protocol and silence. Darren didn't return to the palace after Diana, but from a distance, he watched the boys grow into their roles and slowly away from each other. William leaned into structure. He spoke with polish, attended briefings, fulfilled the role the monarchy had been preparing him for since birth. He seemed older, more measured, a young man sculpted by expectation. Harry was starting to become different too. The boy who once danced around the kitchen with custard on his nose started shrinking into himself. His smile, once wild and uninhibited, began to look rehearsed. The press turned him into a tabloid caricature, always coming up with a story about him. They called him the Wild One, the Party Prince. But Darren saw something else. A young man who was breaking quietly, under the weight of being both too seen and never seen enough. William stood straight. Harry slouched emotionally. One brother carried duty, the other carried confusion. And yet, for a while, they still tried. They showed up to events together. They smiled for the cameras. They gave interviews, laughed at each other's jokes, and offered the illusion of closeness. But Darren saw through it. The easy touch on the shoulder, gone. The brotherly banter, replaced with practiced lines. The warmth he remembered in the kitchen, the real kind, had faded. It reminded me too much of Charles and Diana, Darren later admitted. There was a lot unsaid, and it was getting harder to hide. The press may have fixated on Meghan Markle as the turning point, but Darren disagreed. To him, the unraveling started years earlier, when William accepted his role and Harry realized he never had one. Harry didn't want the throne, but he wanted something. A space, a purpose, and the longer it took to find that, the wider the gap between them became. Still, Darren held on to hope. He believed, truly, that the love they shared as boys would pull them back together. That Diana's memory, her wishes, their childhood bond, would be enough. Once again, Meghan didn't break the boys. That's the part everyone gets wrong. The public narrative was too easy. Harry married an outsider, and suddenly the brotherhood was fractured. But Darren McGrady had watched this unfold long before Meghan ever entered the picture. To him, she didn't create the rift. She became the symbol of it. The real fracture began the moment one brother was crowned the future, and the other was quietly told to stand beside him whether he wanted to or not. Over time, the imbalance grew. William stepped deeper into the machinery of the crown. He became the model royal, composed, careful, always on message. Harry, meanwhile, felt increasingly sidelined. The boy who once smeared frosting across his brother's face in the palace kitchen was now being reduced to punchlines in the press. McGrady remembered when they were kids, conspiring behind his back to prank him. Harry would wait quietly outside the pantry for William, both boys trying to stifle their giggles. They couldn't keep a straight face for more than a minute. Now, they can barely make eye contact. What hit Darren hardest wasn't just what he saw, but what he stopped seeing. Gone were the spontaneous laughs, the banter, the comfort of two people who had shared the same grief, the same mother, the same chaos. What replaced it was polite professionalism, two royals doing a job, not two brothers living a life. And for Darren, it all came back to Diana. He believed fiercely that her memory would tether them together, that the woman who taught them to be human before royalty would remain the glue. But even he had started to wonder, was that belief just a fairy tale he told himself? Because the distance between them now isn't just wide, it's unfathomable. And then came the moment no one expected. Not from the tabloids, not from the palace, but from Darren himself. The chef, the witness, the believer. It didn't come in a press conference. It wasn't teased on social media or fed to royal correspondents to gather clicks. It was just a video. The royal chef, now 63, sat in front of a camera with no palace behind him, no press team, no silver trays or golden crests. Just a man, aged by time and memory, finally saying what he'd spent decades trying not to believe. "I was wrong," he said. "I wanted to believe their bond could survive anything. That the boys I saw laughing in the kitchen, playing tricks and finishing each other's sentences, that they'd always find their way back. But I see now, they're both angry, and maybe they always have been." For Darren, this wasn't a betrayal. It was a release. He didn't name names. He didn't assign blame. What he offered was something much harder: honest reflection. He wasn't speaking like a royal insider. He spoke like a man who had once loved a family like his own and had finally accepted that it had fallen apart. This is the same man who used to see Harry waiting by the pantry door for William. He'd watch them sneak in, giggling, ready to prank him before dinner. It's no doubt heartbreaking for him to see that same Harry walk right past William at the Jubilee. Didn't even pause to look at him. Just walked past him like a stranger. That image painted by Darren stuck with people, not because it was shocking anymore, but because it felt final. For decades, he had been the sharer of their soft stories. He told the world about the birthday cakes, the banana desserts, the flower fights. He preserved the warmth when the press ran cold. And so, when he finally said the words no royal watcher wanted to hear, it landed like a gut punch. Some praised his honesty. They appreciated the fact that he kept it simple and matter-of-fact. Others weren't so forgiving, claiming he didn't have any business sharing his opinions, which is kind of weird if we're being honest. But Darren wasn't feeding into the drama. He was only holding up a mirror, and it hurt to look. He'd spent his life keeping their childhood sacred. But now, with each royal event colder than the last, and each interaction more strained than the one before, he couldn't protect the illusion anymore. "It was a fairy tale," he said. "One I needed to believe in. But fairy tales don't always come true." And maybe what shocked the world most wasn't what he said. It was that it came from him, the man who believed in them more than anyone. Now, when Darren shared his views about the royals, he didn't think it would go viral. He hadn't hired a PR team or funded a flashy rollout or media campaign. He was just an old chef, speaking his truth from the quiet of his own home. But he couldn't help it that the video was everywhere. According to sources close to Kensington Palace, Prince William was deeply disappointed, not just by the comments themselves, but by who had made them. Darren had been a constant during his most fragile years, a comforting face in the chaos of palace life. To hear that same man publicly mourn the loss of William's relationship with his brother felt like betrayal. A royal aide reportedly said, "It's not what he said. It's that he said it at all. On Harry's side, the response was just as raw. Though now far removed from royal protocol, Harry remains fiercely protective of anything tied to his mother. And Darren wasn't just a former employee, he was part of Diana's world. Someone Harry likely assumed would always guard those memories with quiet loyalty. An anonymous friend of the Duke said, "He's not angry at what Darren said. He's hurt that he chose to say it now, when things are already so fractured." But others saw something different. They felt it was necessary. Darren had pulled back the curtain, and what he revealed wasn't a scandal. It was grief. Not just his own, but the public's. A collective mourning for something we all thought would last forever. Because if even the man who stood in Diana's kitchen can no longer see a path back, what hope is there for anyone else? The royal chef remembered a special moment with Princess Diana vividly. The moment she made that unique promise. Diana was said to be stirring a cup of tea. The boys were off somewhere, probably building forts out of sofa cushions or sneaking cookies. She looked up and said, almost casually, "I may not always be around, but as long as they have each other, they'll be okay." It wasn't a declaration. It was a mother's hope. A quiet plea from someone who knew too well how cold the palace could be. She didn't believe in the crown's magic, but she believed in her boys. And so did Darren. He carried that moment with him for years, through the grief of Diana's death, through the spectacle of their weddings, and through every public appearance that followed. He told himself, as long as William and Harry had each other, they'd honor her in the only way that really mattered. But now, that hope feels like a memory slipping through the cracks. What the ex-royal chef said in that video wasn't just his own heartbreak. It was the heartbreak of everyone who watched those boys walk behind their mother's coffin. Two brothers, shoulder to shoulder, bound by something bigger than blood. That image felt unshakable, permanent. And maybe that's why the silence between them now feels so unbearable. It's not just about royalty. It's about resilience, about how we all wanted to believe Diana's sons would defy the odds, the pressure, the palace, that they would be the exception to the rule that tore so many others apart. But if even Darren McGrady, the man who stood in that kitchen, who baked their cakes and saw their childhood unfold like pages of a private storybook, if even he can no longer see a way back, then it's all well and done between the two brothers. Because if Diana's wish couldn't keep them together, what possibly could? Darren McGrady wasn't a royal advisor. He wasn't bound by protocol or politics. He was just the chef. But sometimes, the people behind the scenes see the clearest. He didn't come forward for drama. He came forward because silence, like the kind now separating William and Harry, doesn't heal anything. It only deepens the wound. For the world, the story of William and Harry has always been larger than life. But for Darren, it was two boys in pajamas, giggling in a kitchen that once felt like the safest place on earth. So now we ask the question, can they come back from this? Can Diana's wish still come true? Or has the distance grown too wide to cross? Let us know what you think. Do you believe in a royal reconciliation? Or has Darren simply said what no one else wanted to admit? Hit subscribe for more intimate stories from behind the palace gates and leave a comment below. There's no doubt that sometimes the quietest truths are the ones we need to hear the most.